Hello, welcome back to our series of videos about muscle. In this video, we are going to be talking about initiation of muscle contraction. So, we just went over the process of excitation-contraction coupling, whereby an action potential in the motor neuron eventually, through a series of events, leads to the release of calcium into the cytosol. In this section, we're going to take a look at what happens next. Okay, so before we talk about what happens next, I need to orient you to what the muscle looks like at rest at the molecular level. Okay, so drawing your attention to this figure, what you're looking at here, up here is the thin filament made up of actin, right? And then down here, we've got the thick filament, okay? And then I want to remind you that we have these accessory proteins that are kind of around the thin filament. Now I'm going to tell you what those are. I'm going to introduce you to those molecules, okay? First off, we have this complex. It's a complex of 3 proteins called troponin, okay? And this is a calcium binding protein complex, okay? So we will see what happens with that in the next few slides. After troponin, we've got this blue, kind of long blue cord-like structure, which is a protein called tropomyosin. And what tropomyosin does is that it blocks the site on actin for myosin to bind to it. Okay, so it partially blocks it. So myosin wants to bind to actin, but tropomyosin gets in the way. Okay, myosin is still able to bind like kind of loosely, weakly to the actin. But in order to get muscle contraction, as you'll see, you need a strong bond there, okay? All right, so let's take a look at these events that are going to allow us to contract our muscle after our cytosolic calcium levels go up, okay? First off, our cytosolic calcium levels go up, okay? So we already looked at the events that lead to that. What happens with the calcium is that it's going to bind to troponin. When we bind to troponin, that's going to actually move tropomyosin. Okay, so troponin is going to bind calcium. It's going to move tropomyosin such that the tropomyosin no longer blocks the binding site between myosin and actin. Okay, so now myosin can bind actin strongly, okay? And then it's gonna do a bunch of other things that we'll talk about in the next video that are going to allow muscle contraction to happen. So remember that we're going to move the thin filament relative to the thick filament. But in order to do that, we needed that myosin to be able to access that actin and grab onto it tightly so it could do that movement.